Hey everybody, I just want to talk to you for a little bit about Shadows of Evil, and one of the big questions which kind of many agree to be seemingly a pivotal part of what this map is going to be revolving around, and that's who exactly is the Shadow Man. Uh, I mean, I've heard some theories and that he could be an extension of the devil or the ancient evil from kind of like Mob of the Dead, or that he's Little Eddie from Origins, or that he's Richtofen or Maxis, or even the dead Mexican who Richtofen killed during his testing on Tank, Nikolai, and Takeo. I'm not going to say that any of these are wrong. I don't think anybody's ever going to be right because zombies is just always more questions than answers with every map we get, and I think we have more questions now than we ever had to begin with. So, this is just my theory, and it is what it is. So let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts or questions or theories of your own. So Shadow of Evil, here we go. Shadow Man. Who's the Shadow Man? Well, it's my theory that the Shadow Man is either Lamont Cranston or Kent Allard. That's right, Lamont or Kent. You heard it here first. Alright, so you probably don't know who they are, and honestly, you really shouldn't have to know who they are. But if you do, clap, clap for you. See, these two guys are actually the same person. Lamont Cranston and Kent Allard are both aliases for a popular 1930s radio and print character called the Shadow. As the Shadow Man from SOE was introduced to us via a mysterious narrator of the trailer, so too was the sinisterly voiced Shadow introduced to radio audiences back in 1930 on the Detective Story Hour for Street and Smith publications. The character and the stories of the Shadow were so popular that the writer, Walter Gibson, under the pen name Maxwell Grant, wrote over 300 novel-length stories, often having to write over 10,000 words a day just to keep up with the demand, and did so for over 20 years. Fuck me. The one. And as a tiny side note for all those comic book lovers out there, the Shadow was a major influence on early Batman stories, so much so that Batman and the Shadow, the character, eventually met in the Batman comics, where Batman tells the Shadow that he was such a great influence on him. So, a little interesting for you. Anyway, Gibson's The Shadow was a classic noir anti-hero. He would go out under the cover of night to terrorize criminals, often killing them or leaving the dirty business for others to finish. He didn't have any sympathy for these criminals, and the only thing that really made him a hero was the fact that he went after criminals and not citizens. He was otherwise kind of a bad guy. Definitely a villain. So, he would often wear a black wide brim hat, as well as black capes, black trench coats, or black suits. He was a master detective and had near genius intellect levels, as well as, and I quote, the power to cloud men's minds so they cannot see him. Basically, he was kind of a hypnotic figure that he could trick people so easily that it's almost like he was invisible to them. I don't know how that works. I'll be honest with you, I didn't read any of his stories because there's over 300 of them. Anyway, how does the Shadow connect with Shadows of Evil? Well, when you look at the SOE trailer, we hear the Shadow Man say two quotes, and there's a third quote by Ron Perlman's character, the boxer, but I'll get to that in just a second. So first, the Shadow Man says, "Your sins serve only as an invitation to an evil beyond your imagination." Ooh. Well, that's a pretty standard quote. We might expect that, especially after what we saw in Mob of the Dead. Kind of follows similar lines to that. But then, after Ron Perlman, the boxer, he says, "I think we're being punished. I think all this is happening because we're bad people." Poo poo. Then the Shadow Man says, "I know who you are. I've seen each and every one of your misdeeds." Now, these quotes feel a little close to a couple of the Shadow's own quotes, such as, "Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows." Or, another one, The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The shadow knows. What I see connecting these is a sense of righteousness, a sense of I'm an avenger for justice. You're the evil, and you're being punished for it by me, the Shadow, or the Shadow Man. So they have some similarities there, and I'm sure if you kind of poured over some of the seemingly endless amount of material, you'll find that there's probably other things that are fairly close. Again, this is a theory. So anyway, the second thing that I found is that the image shown in a still image of the Shadow Man, where you see all four characters and then you just have this dark, blacked out figure wearing a fedora or a wide brim hat or something, does kind of match the description of the Shadow, at least in the sense that he's an invisible thing. You don't know what he looks like. He often wears that hat, and he often all wears black. Fairly close. You can make that jump just by saying the Shadow, but still. So the third thing, Shadow fights crime. Despite his harsh vigilante justice, all these characters that we see are criminals. They admit it. They all have done bad things. The magician, the actress, the boxer, the rotten cop. They're all criminals. And as Ron Perlman said, the reason they're being punished is that's what the Shadow does. He punishes criminals. So fourth, the map is called Shadows of Evil. Now, you look at the name of some of the Shadow's stories, the stories by the writer Gibson, you'll find some of them titled Return of the Shadow, The Shadow Strikes, Shadow's Shadow, Revenge of the Shadows, Mark of the Shadow, Shadow Go Mad, Shadow A Go Go, Shadow Shadow Shadow, Shadow Shadow Shadow. So, you do have a similarity in name in the sense that Shadows of Evil, given some of these other things, may not alone sound like much, but it kind of adds on to it. Now, obviously, Gibson has many other books or stories that he wrote that don't contain names exactly like that, but these are just some that highlight the similarity. Fifth, the main writer of The Shadow, Walter Gibson, wasn't only a writer. He was also a magician. And I'm pretty sure there's a magician in Shadows of Evil, right? Gibson was a ghostwriter for several of Houdini's books, as well as partaking in seances to contact Houdini after he had died. Gibson often wrote about Houdini's escape tricks and sleight of hand. Kind of interesting that if they were totally unrelated, that not only do they share some of these things, that he was also a magician, and we have a magician in the story. Maybe a coincidence, maybe not. Next, sixth thing, Shadows of Evil is a pulp noir story, and that's exactly what The Shadow was. It's just pulp noir. They're kind of cheap little stories that you can probably get for dirt cheap. They'd be little novellas or novelettes or something. Seventh, we see in the trailer that there's a perk or ability that allows players to go unseen by the zombies. Now, I think I saw somebody had posted a leak video, and I hate that. But, whatever, I saw it. But that they listed all of the gumballs and what their name was, as well as what their actual function was. I hope they're wrong, because that's kind of shitty. And it was stupid of me to look at it. I ruined it for myself. I don't suggest you do it unless you really don't care, but I hate leaks. Anyway, we see in the trailer, so something that's commonly seen, that the zombies are just going around him like he's not in there. Well, that was a skill of the Shadow. He was basically an invisible character. He was that narrator. It's a skill of his, so kind of connection there as well. Eighth, we see in the trailer a room which looks to be used for rituals of some kind. Even having a small Cthulhu skull, which I can't wait to see what that might actually entail, because I would love to see where that storyline goes. But seeing that Gibson, the writer, was into seances and trying to contact the dead and the afterlife and paranormal and all that, again, just kind of another coincidence that kind of heaps onto it. Maybe, maybe not. Ninth thing, the Shadow does battle with, at times, collectives of enemies. One of his was Hydra, if you want to look at it like the Avengers Hydra. You know, it's a group, you know, of people. It's a collective. Um, but one of these stories and one of these enemies, these collective enemies, was called the Hand. Again, another potential coincidence, but the more coincidences there are, they kind of feel like they add up. All the characters seem to have a mark on their hands, which features a symbol which some have called, I believe, the Mark of the Beast. I've tried to do research and trying to find out what that symbol means. As far as I can tell, it doesn't mean anything, or it's a combination of various other things. The closest I could come up with was that it's a crescent moon, meaning moon, and that it kind of has an eye and then three fingers. Well, the three fingers could mean it's kind of a satanic thing, but I don't know what the eye necessarily means. Put them all together, who the f knows? Maybe we'll find out when we play, maybe not. So, anyway. 10th. Getting long here. Listen to the way the Shadow Man speaks, though. He doesn't sound like he's an evil character. He sounds like he's a righteous avenger. He sounds like he's Batman or something. Again, you know, he's speaking like he's out to get them for what they've done, specifically them, not as a grand evil plan. You know, he doesn't remind me too much of the Mob of the Dead evil, because it just seemed like that was just evil in general. This seems very focused and very specific on these people. So it's a little odd that the way he speaks, you know, it's supposed to sound like he's, you know, the common idea is that he's the enemy here. I'm not necessarily sure that that's the case. Maybe the enemy for these characters, but in context of the whole map, he might not be the greatest evil that's on that map. Just saying, that's even more far out on a limb kind of hypotheses. Anyway, so those are my theories of how the Shadow, this Walter Gibson series of stories, and the stories from the 1930s, which also time-wise kind of links up where these guys are, just kind of fits. So those are my theories on this part of Shadows of Evil and who the Shadow Man is. So be sure to give a like and subscribe. Leave any comment you want. I don't really give a shit. Do you think I'm full of shit? Does any of this that I just said make sense to you? Are the coincidences kind of becoming a little bit more overwhelming? I don't know. Do you have something better? I love hearing theories, so just, you know, throw them at me. I love hearing them, and get a discussion going. All right, guys? Later.